Great to see everyone as usual. And Drew, thanks for facilitating this this panel today. We're really excited about this film, In the Sun, the first from Neutrogena Studio. So I'd like to bring on, in no particular order, first the co-director of the film, Kelsey, who is based in Los Angeles, where I am today. Everyone say hello to Kelsey. And then the masterminds behind the film from the Neutrogena brand, Tyler and Sebastian from Neutrogena, if they can put their cameras on and join us and say hello to the crowd. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We're going to dive into both the film and Neutrogena Studios and the brand purpose and how this journey began, which is literally years in the making. So we're going to have some great conversations today. A little housekeeping and full disclosure. Passion Point is an agency for Neutrogena along with Fleischman Hillard. So we do a good portion of the work on this amazing journey. So always have to disclose that. So before we start talking about the film, I think it would be great to give everyone a little taste of what's to come. The film is going to be live on VOD April 27th, but we have the trailer out now. So we're going to roll the trailer for you so everyone can get a great sneak peek.
I love being out in the sun.
The more sun I absorb, I get that feel-good feelings going on.
The sun makes us happy.
It's also good for us, but if we're not careful, it can harm us.
When you're young, you just don't think that it could happen.
Sunscreen is sticky. It's weird and gross. Because I am brown, that means I don't need it.
So you do have freckles on your back already. That is all from sun damage.
I remember bringing her to the doctor and the doctor saying, it's fine, but I just knew something wasn't right.
You think you have a plan for your life, and then all plans go out the window.
We were in the sun all the time. If I'd known about sunscreen, my life would have been entirely different.
Never thought it would happen.
It debunks the myth that African Americans don't get skin cancer.
It can happen on anybody. We have to be able to embrace life in the sun with keeping our skin safe.
No ray of sunlight's ever
Somebody once said there was no race more ridiculous than one in which you are running against a ghost. And that's what I'm doing. I'm running against a ghost.
Great. Thank you all. So we're going to kick it off with, at brand storytelling, we have so many vehicles for brands to tell their messages. There's so many platforms available now, and they're growing every day. So, and this was now 2 years ago, certainly for Neutrogena, all the platforms that are available to you, you're both pitched every day for new platforms. There's so much to do with earned media, paid media, and of everything you could have done to tell these stories, how did you pick a brand-funded film? And I'm just imagining the conversation, your CFO said, you want to make a what? A movie? So how did that process go, Tyler and Sebastian?
Well, first we delayed that conversation for as long as possible. So we kind of got going, a little bit of maybe a little more forgiveness than permission, because we were super passionate about it. And I think we as marketers, one of the hardest things you can do is get people to actually change their behavior. And we have, it is core to who we are as a healthcare company to have this goal of eradicating preventable skin cancers. We've been doing a lot of stuff in that space for years, really trying to drive impact in people's health and the health of our communities. And skin cancer rates just continue to climb despite our efforts. And so, as we were thinking about it, I was reminded of actually, I love a good quote, even though sometimes they're a little cheesy. I was thinking of a quote that somebody from an agency once read to me, which was tell me the facts and I'll learn, tell me the truth and I'll believe, but tell me a story and it'll live in my heart forever. And that really resonated in terms of like the challenge of getting people to think about things, not just think about things differently, but actually change their behavior. And so it just felt like we needed to tell a story. We needed to appeal not just to people's intellect, but also appeal to their emotion and to their heart, and to have it really, really kind of land. And so how do you tell a really great story? And that's where we started looking at more kind of longer format.
Great. And Tyler, how did you, outside of any movie making you did in high school, being this your big foray into the motion picture industry, how did you go about the process to find your directors, to find the people who would tell the story? Did you just go, I know, like, was it a targeted approach? I know exactly who I need. Did you go broad and start to have a lot of conversations? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, well, we'd never made a movie before, so we weren't sure exactly the right approach to take. We did know that we wanted a team that specialized in storytelling and filmmaking, that was kind of separate from partners that we've worked with in the past for advertising. And the reason for that is because we see what Neutrogena Studios is doing as entertainment, not advertising. And so to start, it was a couple of years ago now, it's been a long journey. We went to our partners at Florence, and basically briefed them on our business challenges and said, here's what we're seeing with skin cancer rates in the country. We're trying to change the trajectory of it. What do you think we could do if we were to make a film? And that's how we got to Kelsey and Bobby, the other co-director. And they both had great experience with documentary, cinema verite. Kelsey had an awesome documentary short, Gnarly and Pink, that featured children, and we loved the tone of it. It was humorous, and we knew we wanted an angle with kids in the sun. And so it really was the perfect pairing. Bobby, who wasn't able to join today, but Bobby's personally affected by skin cancer. His brother passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago. And so that's one of the storylines in the film, is Bobby's parents and their journey losing their son.
Got it. Great. So Kelsey, you and Bobby had this opportunity to make, kind of, you want to make an uplifting film, yet the tonality and the subject matter has to be dealt with correctly. But at the end of the day, you want to have a positive message, engage the audience, a lot of challenges there. And then in terms of finding all the subjects, which were the right subjects from an individual story perspective, yet how would they all mesh together to make a cohesive film? So what was kind of your process to find the right subjects?
Yeah, so we took a very broad approach to casting. What we tried to do was start from within. So who did we know in our lives, in our inner circles, in our families, who had either been impacted by the sun or had some kind of story that centered around being in the sun? So of course, as Tyler mentioned, Bobby was personally affected. He lost his brother, and his brother's only 30 years old. I knew him, all of our friends knew him. So that was definitely like a very personal story to him that we both felt would really integrate well and have a huge impact in the movie. Another family is Lucy's family that's also in the film. She is from the UK, and she's a very close personal friend of mine, and she spends tons of time in the sun. And she has multiracial kids. So like her kids are half Caucasian, half Indian. So they have a very different understanding of sun protection. And as you heard in the trailer, one of her sons even said, because I'm brown, I don't need to wear it. And that was something that I also connected with growing up, because I'm also biracial. So, this idea of sun protection and, do I have to wear sunscreen, or am I going to be affected by skin cancer in the future, is something that I didn't have much knowledge of. So in making this film, I thought it was definitely a huge educational piece for me. And, highlighting those stories of individuals who might look, different from each other, we all are still impacted in the same way. Stu's story was very interesting. He, when we met him, he was, I think, 86 years old, and he grew up in the circus. And so he was always like in his Speedo, like doing backflips on the beach, and was always in the sun and never, ever wore sunscreen. And then there's Monique's family in New York, and they're all African American. And Monique actually had melanoma when she was a kid. So as you can see, we kind of picked from all of these different diverse stories. And we also worked with a real people casting company. That's how we found Monique and a couple of other subjects in our film. But again, we really started with an intimate approach and then went a little bit broader through that real people casting company.
Great. I should mention an important part of the film, back to Tyler, is Kerry Washington is one of the executive producers, which lends a lot of credibility. What is the genesis of that, and how did Kerry get connected and feel strongly about this subject matter?
Yeah, definitely. It was really exciting when we approached Kerry Washington and her team at Simpson Street to be one of the executive producers on the film. Kerry has a personal passion for education around sun protection, specifically in the Black community. Kerry's been a really proud creative consultant for Neutrogena over the past few years. And so it really was a no-brainer to work with Kerry and her team, who are expert Emmy award-winning storytellers, and have them kind of put their fingerprint on the film, with things like casting and music and editing and even the marketing of the film. Kerry and team were a fantastic partner to us throughout this whole journey.
Great.
Yeah, just incredible. I mean, they made the project so much better. It was really amazing. It was an absolute privilege and joy to be able to work with Kerry and Pilar and Simpson Street. Really amazing.
So I have another question on that, but Kelsey, just as a quick follow-up, when making films, what I have found is sometimes we lay out the film, the subjects, the timing, we block it out. We pretty much know what we're going to see at the end. Did that happen with this film, or during the filming process, did the interviews and the story start to kind of shift and change, and you had to kind of rethink what the end product would be?
Yeah, I mean, as is the nature of documentary filmmaking, right? We have this concept and like this North Star of what we think the film is going to be. And then we meet each of our subjects and we meet everyone and we hear their stories. And then inevitably that's going to shift as we're filming, and of course in the edit as well. There was even a point during filming, I mean, I think it was like a 2 or 3 week shoot. It's been so long since we shot it, I forget the exact timeline, but there was even a point, like I think on day 10 or something, that we really shifted the focus to be not as much on the product of sunscreen, but more so about these stories. And I think, that overall like enhanced the quality of the film. And as Tyler and Sebastian said, I love the fact that Simpson Street was so hands-on and Kerry was so hands-on during the edit process, because that also shifted our story. And it's when we added Monique's family to the story. I mean, we did a live viewing session. She gave live feedback. All of her notes were extremely insightful and extremely helpful. We, at that point, even decided who our target market was, and that was moms, because what Kerry realized was that there's so many moms in this film. There's so many stories of parents that are like, we're trying our best. We're doing everything we can. And I think that storyline, that vein of the story really resonated with her, because she really connected to that and felt the same way about her family and her kids. So yeah, I mean, we have ideas and those ideas shift, whether that's in production or in post-production. And so that was the process of this film.
Yeah, I can add, as a marketer, we're so used to having lockdown storyboards and scripts that everyone has to approve before you even like turn on that camera. And this is the total opposite of that. The most control we can have is choosing our cast, our directors, and setting a tonality for the film. And we spent a lot of time doing that. And we had these ideal storylines of like, oh, we'd love if this character could speak to that and this one could speak to that. But in the end, you can't hang your hat on that, because you don't know what's going to happen. And it doesn't set you up for success if you go into it with an expectation of, let's capture this, because it's not true. You really want to capture what naturally happens. And by doing that and leaning into the true stories of our subjects, I think we ended up with a really great film, once you get over that initial worry of like, I don't know how this is going to turn out.
So that brings up an interesting point. And, all the time when we have these panels and we have these discussions, someone will say, wow, that's great. You're working on this great branded entertainment project. And I immediately pull out my tab and go, no, it's a brand funded film. There's a big difference. And people always ask what the difference is, or they'll say, what role did the brand play in the film? So before people see it with the trailer of the film, they're like, oh, so are people walking around with bottles of Neutrogena sunscreen in the film? And those are decisions that are made up front. So Tyler, how were those decisions discussed and agreed upon?
I feel like Sebastian, maybe you could speak to this one better than me.
Well, I think, you know, we knew we had a big hurdle in terms of it being a brand funded film, and this was about skin cancer, and this was important, and we wanted to bring credibility, and we wanted to make sure that people would hear our message. So very early on, we made decisions to make this completely unbranded and to really, you know, have strong separation of church and state, if you will. And you know, the theory was essentially, and so how do you reconcile that with our responsibilities as marketers and to the brand? It's like our theory was like all boats rise, right? If we can do something that really changes how people approach their time in the sun and sun safety, and we can actually make a meaningful change in the rates of skin cancer, everybody wins, you know, and including the Neutrogena brand. And so we felt, you know, comfortable that that would be the case, and that by taking that approach, we were going to have this really nice balance of you know, kind of purpose and commerce that really reflected who we are as a brand and what our values are and what our mission is as it relates to people's health. And interestingly, I also wanted, you know, in part of that journey in terms of the casting decisions and the storylines that we wanted to pursue, and a focus on moms and everything. Interestingly, a lot of that was also while we had no idea where it was going to go, and that was really exciting. A lot of that, though, was informed by, for lack of a better word, like the science. You know, we have been at sun care for a long time, and we know a lot about the kind of like the behavioral psychology components. We know when you know, UV damage is most damaging to people, and we know the role that caregivers and moms and dads play in establishing healthy habits for kids. And so all of you know, how we kind of set some of those things up were really informed by our kind of deep experience in the category, and our kind of approach, our kind of healthcare approach to the category.
So interesting piece here, especially for In the Sun, about this journey. And, you know, full transparency, the film was quote unquote finished last year. We were set to premiere it last spring at a big New York film festival. And then the pandemic hit. And because of it, every business in the world was affected. So we certainly couldn't, you know, feel bad for this project because, you know, because of what was going on in the world, there was far worse things to worry about, but we could not premiere it. And so then we had to go on hold for a minute. But when we went on hold, it gave the brand time to really think about the film, look at the film, think about what else could be done, from, you know, research to school. And then the film kind of took on a new life, which wouldn't have happened if the original plan went through. So Tyler, do you want to kind of talk about the journey that this accidentally happened?
Yeah, it's a good accident. I never thought of it like that, but I like that. I mean, one of the things that I can speak to that we did during the pandemic was we thought about how can we broaden the reach of this film, specifically with a younger audience, because we know that sun exposure at a young age can be far more damaging than when you're older. So it's really important to educate youth about safe sun practices. And so one of the things we did working with Marcus and the team at Passion Point is create a school screening program where we send screening kits with some products, a copy of the film, educational guidelines and materials to middle school teachers across America. And this program is just kicking off, but To date, I think we have over 1,500 middle school teachers who have signed on, which is just phenomenal to see that and the excitement around the film. And I'm excited to see the impact that we can have in these classrooms and see where this goes.
You know, it's an interesting, the backstories of what's interesting is we're working with a partner in a company to do this. And I'm looking at the agreement and it's like, well, where's the guarantee? We're paying, there's a budget. What's our minimum? They go, we can't put a minimum. Like, what, 50 schools? They go, we just can't predict in the world of the pandemic. We can't predict anything. I said, I don't know how I can recommend to the client spending anything with not some result. And they said, we're 100% confident, but we can't guarantee one school. And I was really nervous about, honestly, talking to Tyler would look at me like, huh? And Tyler was just, I have confidence. Let's just have confidence, everything. And I'm like, and when we put it out there, we could not put it out with Kerry's name because we hadn't announced it yet. So I'm like, so it's just a film about skin cancer. We got no. And all of a sudden they called us up and said, oh my God, we're oversubscribed. We need more kids. And we were like, what? So the response was overwhelming from teachers, which was just so amazing because those eyeballs are just so important.
Yeah, I was blown away. I was confident, but I didn't expect us to get the numbers that we did, especially in less than a week. So, I mean, we ran out of DVDs. We had to switch to digital school screenings now.
And then just the segue, and then there's a couple of questions, was then it gave you as the brand time to think about, you know, we've had conversations where we've said, listen, a lot of brands are putting out one film and they put their name in the front and it's their film and you never see it again. It's like doing one commercial or one digital program and never again. And we had those discussions. Somehow the forces that be, Tyler and Sebastian, you were able to say, you know, we're going to make a longer commitment, even though this movie isn't out yet, and create Neutrogena Studios. How did that get sold in?
You want to start, Tyler?
Sure. Yeah, I think, Marcus, you're right. I mean, we realized that if you want to do brand funded content well, it can't just be a one-off. This has to be a commitment from our brand. And Sebastian and I realized that sun care is just one of the many categories in which we play as a skin health brand, and that there were so many more stories to tell. And so what we ended up doing was creating this studio, Neutrogena Studios. It's actually an official division of Johnson & Johnson Consumer. And our mission is to tell stories to educate about skin health, celebrate beauty for all, and inspire people to action. Many brands are creating content studios today. I think what sets Neutrogena Studios apart is this idea of inspiring people to action. No matter what the project is, we want there to be a tangible takeaway of somebody changes a behavior in their life, whether it's wearing a hat every time they go outside, or getting their first ever skin check with a dermatologist, or even looking at something differently that they hadn't thought of in that way before. Certainly, In the Sun has changed my relationship with the sun. I wear a daily SPF now, and I never did that before. And we think there's just more potential here. So what I can say about the future of Neutrogena Studios is, you know, next up we have our young filmmaker program, where we're empowering 2 Gen Z filmmakers to tell stories about skin health and really living into the new Neutrogena purpose, which is called For People with Skin. And it's this idea that skin should never be a barrier to unlock what's best for you. So we created the Young Filmmaker Program in partnership with Ghetto Film School, which is a nonprofit that's been around for over 20 years. We're finding 2 incredible Gen Z directors, and we're going to be producing some short films with them around that topic. So more to come from Neutrogena Studios for sure.
Yeah, and just to build, it was actually not nearly as tough to sell in as you might have thought. There was actually a lot of support. From my boss, who was a huge supporter, Kerry, of the program, of the initiative on up. And I think part of it is because, they really saw our orientation. This wasn't a vanity project, right? This was like our orientation to leveraging this approach to solve health issues. You know, it was just so squarely centered on what we were trying to do as an enterprise, and it was just kind of a new approach and a creative approach that it actually wasn't that tough to sell in. And there's been a lot of support from leadership about it. And then, you know, another thing that we've noticed now that we've announced, and it's broader and both kind of externally and internally, we're getting a lot of traction and everything. It's a incredible shot of energy to the enterprise, to the organization. Like, it is a manifestation of our purpose, and people love to do purpose oriented work. And I think that, you know, people at J&J and at Neutrogena tend to have a lot of that. You know, we feel a lot of purpose in our work. And so for people to see just such a clear manifestation of the hard work that we're always doing, and the purpose that we have presented to the world, it's just been like just a huge boost and so much interest. And so was not that hard to sell in, and I think is going to be, you know, a lot of fun to keep it going.
I saw a couple of questions in the box. One was, you know, how we were able to sell in without a storyboard, but I think Tyler answered that already. Again, that was just part of the creative process on you know, putting a brand funded film together. But the next question was about, if you're not showing close-ups of Neutrogena product, then how are you being transparent with consumers about the brand? So I get asked that a lot, so I'll just give a quick answer and then turn it over. But the answer is, it is. If you look at the press release, if you look at the front of the film, if you look at the credits, it is clearly identified as Neutrogena Studios. It's on the key art, it's on the trailer. So we have always, with all brand funded films, full transparency to the consumer that it was funded by the brand. But yet, knock on wood, to date, we've never had any pushback, because they truly are great films. And people just go, wow, it's a great movie. Someone had to fund it. Half the movies you see in Hollywood, there are investment funds behind it. You don't know who they are. So funding has to come from somewhere. But we're always transparent. So you'll see Neutrogena Studios. No one will ever, you know, not know about the brand's involvement. But Tyler, Sebastian, if you wanted to jump on that.
Yeah, you're totally right, Marcus. And for more detail, I mean, in the original cut of the film, the credit was at the end credits, proudly commissioned by Neutrogena Studios. And during the pandemic, we made a strategic decision to actually brand even up front. So in the very opening of the film, you'll see Neutrogena Studios as well. I think that's about two things. One, it's transparency. We're not trying to hide anything. We're really proud of this film. And two, brand purpose is so important nowadays that, you know, as a brand, we're really proud of this film and the messages that it has. And we want, you know, we want to take credit for that and the work we put in here. So it was important to us that people knew this was a film from Neutrogena.
Got it. And Kelsey, just the same from you, as you made the film, did you ever find a time where you wanted to kind of want to invoke the brand more, or were there natural brand moments that you actually took out because you felt they look a little? How did you achieve that natural balance?
Yeah, honestly, there was never pressure to include the brand in the film. So as a filmmaker, I really appreciated that that level of freedom. You know, there was never a point where a scene was going on and someone was handing me a bottle of Neutrogena to put in the scene or inject in the scene if it didn't feel right. I mean, there were even moments, to be quite frank, where like there was another brand being used, but we allowed that person to use the brand they were comfortable with. So to that extent, like, you know, it wasn't difficult for me as a filmmaker to just have the stories shine, you know, and just not have the brand itself be the focal point, or the sunscreen itself be the focal point of the film. So I really appreciated that from Neutrogena Studios all throughout the process.
So a conversation that we've had with every brand about the film is, how does the brand associate, how does the brand connect it to the film, which we just covered, and the other is distribution. So we always have this balance of, we want to be on premium distribution channels where people go to watch premium distribution. And our films in the past at Passion Point, they've been on Netflix, Hulu, theatrical, Amazon Prime. And we had this honest conversation, you know, with Tyler about, yes, we want to be premium. We've got great filmmakers. We have Kerry Washington involved, so we want to be on a lot of the cool VOD platforms and Roku and Vudu and Google Play. Yet we want, this is a film for everyone to see. I mean, everyone really needs to see this. Like Tyler, I went out and went, oh boy, I am guilty, as Tyler was, and started buying more sunscreen. So we're like, it's kind of we have to do this. So I think kind of since we had extra time to think about it, we started to change our thinking about making it available on YouTube for everyone versus just trying to be premium. Tyler, do you want to kind of talk about that distribution journey?
Yeah, it certainly was a journey and some challenges and sudden policy changes and twists and turns throughout. Ultimately, we grounded ourselves in the idea that we wanted this film to have maximum reach, and putting it behind a paywall is gonna limit that reach. So we're really excited that we're going to be available on YouTube on April 27th next week, and that doesn't only unlock mass reach in the US, but it actually enables us to have global reach with other markets. So, Johnson & Johnson operates in many countries, and we've had significant interest from the Neutrogena teams in Brazil and Australia, for example, who are now taking the film and making it part of their marketing plans this year as well. And we can all now drive to the same single home for the film. We have subtitles in different languages. So really, we've taken this idea that started in Los Angeles, and naturally, because the content resonated without us even trying, we now have global appeal and are excited to see how other markets leverage it.
Yeah, and I think another surprising piece, again, along this journey, we're being transparent for the brand storytelling audiences. Our plans were always to submit the film to film festivals, but right away we're a short doc, so it limits. There's a lot of festivals that won't take it. Number two, people are like, oh, Kerry's in the movie. No, she wasn't. She was an executive producer. And it's funded by a brand. So we tried to really manage expectations about, we're going to submit to film festivals, but let's realize in terms of becoming an official selection, it's not easy for any film. In fact, whenever you look at rejection letters from any film festival, they'll say, sorry, I didn't make it, but we had 38 slots and 1,200 entries. So you say, wow, that really is a difficult process. But here we are at 7 film festivals have already confirmed our participation. It's not Sundance, we'll be honest, but credible film festivals. So again, Sebastian and Tyler, did the brand, when that news came in along with the school reaction, has that again changed some of the thinking of what you have here?
Absolutely. I mean, well, it's been, I guess yes and no, because it has been very validating to what we were trying to do. It really, and perhaps being being a little naive, like I personally didn't imagine that we wouldn't be in the film festival, because we made a great movie and we did so with, very good intentions. I was thinking about that with the distribution strategy, how that kind of links, and it's a little bit like, what is your objective, right? Like, what is your objective, and what is your KPI? What are your KPIs, right? And in our leading indicators, our leading KPIs is reach, because ultimately our objective is to see a reduction in the incidence of skin cancers in the U.S. And so, given that those were our intentions, that we were also able to work with the American Academy of Dermatology and the Melanoma Research Foundation. In fact, Courtney, in the film, who's featured in the film, and one of the big stories in the film, came to us from our partnership with the Melanoma Research Foundation. So, it just really felt like everything was kind of coming together with Kerry Washington on the project. And so I think that maybe it's a little bit of my naivete that made me think, like, sure, why can't we be at film festivals, and why can't we have success in treatment of this film as like a genuine piece of entertainment, and certainly not an advertising, but an advertisement.
So we had a great follow-up question from the audience, an obvious one, of course, as we're talking. They're like, this is great, but how are you going to measure impact? How are you going to measure results? And that was brought up early on. We were talking about, yeah, we're going to enter this into the award shows. And having been a judge at the Cannes Lions, I knew they go, this is great, but did you achieve your goals? We started to think about that early on. How do you know the message worked? And so, Tyler, do you want to just talk about research and
Yeah,
look at
definitely. Metrics are incredibly important to us. And one of the ways in which we kind of got a pulse check along the way is we did test screenings. And so one of the test screenings that we did this year, we had about 200 individuals, a diverse group of people. And we asked them questions about attitudes on sun safety, skin checks, seeing dermatologists before and after watching the film. And off the top of my head, some of the most incredible results we saw with that, 86% of people who watched the film were more likely to get a skin check with a dermatologist or do a self skin check after watching the film. And that kind of metric is exactly what we were looking for, because we really want to drive real behavior change and help curb the trajectory of skin cancer rates in the country. And when we saw that data, we said, wow, this is working. This is doing what we wanted it to do. Now, how do we get as many people as possible to see that? And the film festivals help with that. The distribution strategy helps with that. And then media strategy and advertising as well.
Fantastic. All right, great. Well, we've hit most of the big points here. So we really appreciate everyone's time. It's been great to tell the story of this journey. We hope everyone will watch the film on the 27th when it comes out. Google Play, Apple TV, YouTube, whatever your platforms are on. Drew, do you want to come back and take the reins?
Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for joining. And like Marcus said, April 27th, you can go to inthesunfilm.com to learn more. Thank you, Tyler and Sebastian and Kelsey, for joining us. And thank you, Marcus, for moderating this chat. You can find this recording on YouTube tomorrow. You can go to BrandStorytelling.tv to look up more streams. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.